Hello, my name is Katie Sherrill, and I just wanted to share part of my testimony with you guys. I think we have so many stories that make up our testimony, and I just want to share God's faithfulness and how He's brought me to where I am today. I was raised in church from the time I was 10. We went periodically before then, but faithfully from the time I turned 10, and we were there every time the doors were open. So we're talking Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, Bible study, and I was so thankful for that foundation that I had from being raised in church, because as I walked through my adult life, I desperately needed that foundation. In 2008, I was newly married and found out I was pregnant with my first child, and I was so excited. I wrote that baby letters every day and prayed over it and for its future. And I went into my first ultrasound appointment. It was the end of my first trimester, and I looked at the ultrasound tech, and I knew what she was going to tell me. And that face that she made, I just wanted the whole world to stand still right then. And she patted my leg, and the doctor said, "Your baby has no heartbeat." He was very nonchalant, and he said, "It happens to 1 in 4 women, and you'll lose your child." And my entire world was just broken then. I left there kind of numb and not understanding at all. I didn't understand how that was happening. And so my miscarriage took a long time. It took days. And I really struggled during that time with God and with just some big questions I had. And so I had lost my first child, and that next Sunday, I knew as an adult, I was no longer under my parents' umbrella. I was in my own home, I was married, and I was dealing with huge adult issues at that time with the loss of my child. And so I knew either I was going to go to church broken, or I was never going to go to church again. And that Sunday came, and I remember getting in my car. I turned on worship music, and a worship song came on. I had my crying session before I walked into church, and I got there, and I walked in a little bit late, so I didn't have to greet everyone. And I sat by my parents with tears in my eyes the whole sermon. And I left there, and I knew that God had me. I felt His peace in such a hard time in my life. I went in for my checkup and was told that I would never have children. They said that my miscarriage was so bad that there was no way I could ever carry a child again. That was in December of 2008. And then May of 2009, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, Sophia. I was told numerous times during that pregnancy, they said, "You're not going to carry her. You're not going to carry her 24 hours. And I just stood firm on God and what I knew. And I knew if He placed her in my womb, that I was going to have that child. And the doctors would tell me that, and I would say, "No, she's going to come. She's going to be here." And I was just very adamant that I knew that God did that for a reason. And so I was on bed rest, which bed rest to me meant I went in and I sat in that pew and my feet were up. And I was in church every time those doors were open. And I just fought, and I stood, and I believed that God was going to give me this child, and He did. And in the midst of that, I had lost my first child and my marriage. So I raised Sophie as a single mom. She is now 13. And God just showed how faithful He was during that time. And I needed to go through that to grow. And I think sometimes we go through really hard times to make us the person we are today. And sometimes we don't always have the answers this side of heaven as to why things happen. And that's okay, because I've come to terms now that I am not raising my child, but Jesus is. And so that gives my heart the comfort it needs. Then fast forward to 2021. It was actually two years ago this week, because it keeps coming up in all of my social media memories. I was taken in for an upper endoscopy, which is a super simple procedure. It's a camera down your throat, and I've had several, so I knew what I was going into. And we divided and conquered. My dad took me to my appointment. Sophie stayed with my mom and held down the fort at my business. So I woke up from my procedure in a lot of pain, and I knew something was wrong. And I had expressed to the nurse numerous times, I am in a lot of pain, and this is not normal. I know what normal is after this. And it kind of was just brushed off, and I was sent home. I go home and I go straight to bed. And Sophie came up to check on me. And after daycare ended, I came downstairs and I was running a temperature. And I knew that like my worst fear was a perforation. And with the temperature, I knew that that was what it was. So we made the phone call and they said, come straight to the emergency room. So again, divide and conquer. Dad takes me, mom watches Sophie, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. So that was a struggle because he was the only one that could be there. And we go in to the emergency room and they do a chest x-ray. They say, she's fine. You can take her home. And my dad's like, something is very wrong with her. She cannot breathe. And they did a CAT scan. They came in and told me, you have a perforation. We're going to have an emergency surgery for you. The surgeon is on his way, and you probably are not going to make it out of surgery. And if you do make it out of surgery, you are going to have a feeding tube the rest of your life. I'm 34 at the time with an 11-year-old at home as a single parent. And I was like, fear overwhelmed me at that point. And it was not a fear of what's going to happen if I die, because my last breath here, I am confident knowing my next breath is in heaven. It was that I need to be a mom. I need to raise my child. And as fear is overtaking me, I stopped. And I had to remember, we serve a God that is a miracle working God. He parted the Red Sea. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and he still works miracles. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And as that fear came, and I stopped and remember who God was, a peace came over me. And the surgeon looks at me and they're still telling me all of these things. And I said, I'm going to be fine because I can do hard things. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And they kind of just looked at me like, okay. And I was wheeling into surgery, saying every Bible verse I had ever had memorized. And I just kept saying, Katie, you can do hard things. You can do this. You've got this. And I looked at them all before I went into surgery and I said, listen, I am not a patient. I am not a number. My name is Katie. I have a daughter at home, and you do whatever you need to do to get me off this bed. And I just went, they hooked me up to the IV and I went to sleep saying, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I remember waking up and I was like, oh, I'm awake, I'm alive. And I was just kind of very groggy. And my dad was standing beside my bed, and middle of pandemic. So it was, excuse me, sir, it's not visiting hours, so you need to leave. If she has a roommate in her bedroom upstairs, you are not allowed in the hospital at all, and she will be here at least a week. I was like, oh my gosh. My dad hugs me, prays with me, tells me bye, and I'm telling the nurse, like, I cannot have a roommate. Like, you have to make sure I don't have a roommate. I have to have my family here. And I went upstairs, and by the grace of God, I had no roommate. So my dad was able to come in every day. I was in the hospital 8 days with a PICC line. I was nothing to eat or drink at all. If anything, if I swallowed anything, they were worried the perforation would get worse. So that was a struggle. I always have like a drink by me constantly. So 8 days with nothing to drink, I had to quote a lot of, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me through that time. And I couldn't see Sophie, which was the hardest part. I had never been away from her like that. Thank God for technology and FaceTime and, bedtime prayers and things that we could still do through technology. But it was hard. And I was like, God, I don't understand. Like, I have no clue what's going on, but I'm just going to go with it. And I used my room as a ministry to others. I constantly had praise and worship going. I had sermons that I was watching on my iPad. I had nurses that came in and prayed over me and prayed for me. I had nurses that would spend their lunch hour in my room and just really encourage me, and I would encourage them. And I grew so much. I was not the same girl that walked in, that walked out of that hospital. And during midweek, I was struggling. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm not understanding what is going on. And she said, Katie, something good will come out of this. And I'm like, can't think of one good thing that's going to come out of this. And she's like, don't worry, God's got this. Something good will come out of this. And I was released on a Tuesday. So I had spent 8 days in there and I got to come home, and it was a struggle. I mean, like, the next month was very difficult as far as like diet wise and appointments and whatnot. And I had my follow-up the following month, and I told him, I said, I'm having some weird pain. He goes, it's your gallbladder, so we're going to do an ultrasound. And I'm like, okay. So he schedules an ultrasound, and I drive up and I do my ultrasound on a Friday. And the girl that's doing my ultrasound's like, so I want you to know that like you can look in your portal, and the doctor should call you, but you can look in your portal. And I'm like, my portal? I'm not tech savvy. So I downloaded the app and got this portal and didn't really look into it. So Tuesday came, and my mom says, have you heard anything about your ultrasound? And I was like, nope. And within probably 5 minutes, my phone dings and it says, you have a new test result. And I open it up, and it says, on my kidney, renal cell carcinoma until proven otherwise. And it showed the size of it. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't really know what renal cell carcinoma is at the time. I have all these daycare children coming in. Sophie's getting ready for art camp. I copy paste it over to Google. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have kidney cancer. And the statistics on kidney cancer on Google are not great at all. I was very young to be diagnosed. Most people are above 60 and they're males, and I was 34. And so I'm like trying to process this while I'm working and while I'm getting Sophie ready for art camp. So I print my information, I take her to art camp, and I leave her there. I go straight to my doctor, who has been my doctor for 26 years. And I go in and I tell the secretary, I need to see the doctor. And she's like, well, hon, doc's kind of busy today. Of course, like you can't just walk in and ask to see a doctor. So she's like, can I help you? And I was like, can you just please hand her these papers? And tears fill my eyes. And she said, yeah. And then she comes back and she opens the door and she said, we have a room for you. And I went back, and my doctor is consoling me as I'm sobbing. And she said, hun, medically you have kidney cancer. And I said, but it says until proven otherwise. What does that mean? And she's like, well, that would mean that they would do a biopsy, or they would take your kidney and see if it truly is cancer. She's like, but right now you 100% have it in the medical field terms. And I was like, okay. And all I could think about was my grandpa had passed away of kidney cancer. So yet again, that fear filled me that day so bad. And my mom calls me. She says, Katie, don't come back into work. I have a sub. She said, go have your moment, cry, do whatever you need to do. And then you're going to get up and you're going to pray, and you're going to remember who your God is. And so I had my moment. I prayed, and I remembered who my God was. And I knew he would take care of me. And it was just a struggle immensely then, because not only was it my kidney, it was they had found other things in my body that had to be checked. And so I was having all of these appointments, and I saw local urologists, 2 different ones. One was very nonchalant, as well, you just need your kidney taken out and that's it. And the next one was in tears, legitimately, and I really left his office feeling like I was dying. And he told me, he said, if I were you, I'd go to a big hospital, because where your cancer is, and he showed me, he said, it's right by the artery of your kidney. And that was my goal, was to get to a big hospital in Chicago. So we make numerous phone calls. My doctor spent her entire day off, and we could not find a surgeon to see me that would take my insurance. It was an awful process. So my mom and dad, being the parents that they are, said, call Mayo Clinic and we'll get you an appointment. Mayo Clinic, to make an appointment, is $5,000. And I said, no, we're not making an appointment with Mayo Clinic. We're going to just stop and we're going to pray. So we did. We all agreed in prayer that God was going to send the right surgeon to me for my procedure. And it was either that day or the next day. I had made a phone call to my last hospital in Chicago to call, and they would take my insurance. They paired me with a urologist who had hit all of his residency was done at Mayo Clinic through the oncology and urology department. And it was just that sense of peace, like, God's got this. Through our hard times, God has this. And my mom said, Katie, if you wouldn't have had your perforation, we would have never found your cancer. And it had grown within a month. It grew an entire centimeter. So it was just amazing, because God works in mysterious ways that we don't understand. As I'm in the hospital for 8 days thinking, what's going on? He was working behind the scenes to save my life. And I went to a local facility to have a mammogram done because they needed to check to make sure the cancer hadn't spread. And I'm done. And before I get dressed, they tell me, wait, we have to do an ultrasound. And I was like, oh, instant, I'm sobbing. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I need to know now, like, what are you looking for? I was a mess. And I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, pray. Like, just pray with me, pray for me. She gets all, everybody to pray. And the tech comes in. She's like, okay, we're ready for your ultrasound. And I'm explaining to her, I'm like, I'm young. I just got diagnosed with kidney cancer. We're checking to see if this spread. She went and got the what is that called?
Radiologist.
Yes, sorry. Okay, you'll have to edit that part. She went and got the radiologist, and they read my results right then. So I went to the doctor and I handed her my results, and she said, you have your results already? And I was like, yeah. She said, they don't read them the day of the appointment. I said, but God made sure that he intervened, and my scans were red right then. And I did not, it had not spread. And then I had to see a thoracic surgeon in Chicago. And the day I saw the thoracic surgeon, he cleared me for surgery and told me, you have to get the approval from a gastroenterologist. And you looks like you have an appointment, but I think it's the wrong gastroenterologist. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't have my kidney surgery until I'm cleared from all of these other surgeons. So I go to the gastroenterologist department, and the secretary says, let me see your scans. And I hand her a CD, and she said, okay, I'll just be in touch. And I'm leaving Chicago, and I get a phone call. And they said, can you be here at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning? Because your gastroenterologist can see you. And he's one of 3 of the best gastroenterologists in the state of Illinois that you need to be cleared by. And God moved mountains then, because my gastroenterology appointment shouldn't have been for 3 to 4 months. And they were concerned that my cancer would continue to grow in that time. So I saw the gastroenterologist, and I got cleared for surgery. And leading up to I had a partial right nephrectomy, which means that they took part of my right kidney. And leading up to that, from June until August 13th, it was a struggle. It was a battle that we were fighting daily. And I'm so thankful that I could fight that with my family, with my support system, and I didn't do it alone. And God places people in your life to send you the Bible verses, to send you the songs, and to pray with you and to pray over you. And during that time, my mom and I would wake up every single morning faithfully and do a devotion, read a book on healing, and we did communion every day. And doing communion every day was my way of saying, God, I know that you sent your son to die on the cross for my sins, but he also sent Jesus to die on the cross for my healing. And it says, by your stripes, we are healed. And every day I stood firm on that. And every day I would wake up overwhelmed. And I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And I struggled immensely when I would wake up in the mornings, because I was like, oh, another day to fight this battle, that I'm overwhelmed. And every night I would go to bed so full of God. And it was like Satan came every morning, like, okay, here we go again. Are you tough enough to do this again? And I'm like, yep, I can do this. And my mom would look at me randomly, and she's like, no Google. And she's like, it's a good day to have a good day, faithfully. And I would be like, it's a good day to have a good day. And I learned through that process that we are fighting a battle in our mind. That battle was harder than my health battle, because I would question, like, what's going to happen if I don't make it, or if Sophie has to be raised without a mom, or, all of these things were coming into my head, and I would have to stop, and I would have to always remember who God was. And I would have to faithfully read my devotion and pray and know that God is good. And I don't understand why things happen, but he is so faithful. And we prayed for my healing every single day. And God didn't miraculously heal my body. They went in to do my surgery, though, and my cancer that I had been told by every urologist that I saw that was right at the artery of my kidney was actually at the upper right pole of my kidney, so barely any of my kidney was removed. And that was an answer to prayer. But I realized that life is hard. We are not promised easy this side of heaven, but he's so faithful, and he's so good. And during that struggle, I just was like, God, use me. However you can use me, whatever path I need to take for you to get glory through this, use me. And God did, faithfully, whether it was a nurse that I witnessed to or my pre-op nurse who was in tears because she said, honey, I'm so sorry. And I was like, you know what? It's okay. God's got this. And every doctor's appointment I went into, they would say, you have this like positive attitude. We don't see people like that. I'm like, because I know that I serve a faithful God and I know that I'm going to be okay. And they would tell me, you're going to heal so good because you have that. And my healing process was amazing because of that. And I'm so thankful that we go through trials and we go through hard times, but that we serve a God that goes through them with us. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from my health issues in life, is that God is still good. And I just wanted to share that to encourage others that might be walking through that, or maybe you've walked through it and you don't understand why. It's to encourage you that God's got a plan, and He's faithful no matter what.